Hello and welcome to DWR's Sustainable Groundwater Management Program Assistance Webinar. My name is Steven Springhorn and I work in DWR's SMG program, and I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in to the webinar today. I'm joined today by my colleagues from DWR's SGM program here in Sacramento and from our 4 region offices across the state. We're also joined today by staff from the State Water Resources Control Board's SGMA program. The purpose of today's meeting is to inform Groundwater Sustainability Agencies, or GSAs for short, stakeholders and related entities about DWR's assistance, services, and tools related to Groundwater Sustainability Plan development, or GSPs. Another objective of today's webinar is to hear from you during our question and answer session so we can increase our understanding of your local needs related to guidance, data, or tools, and also answer your questions related to GSP development. The first presentation of the day will provide an overview of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA for short, and details on GSP development. However, I'd like to quickly highlight the current status of SGMA implementation, which is there's a lot of planning and technical work occurring in the groundwater basins across the state. And there are positive signs that progress is being made to meet the new requirements of SGMA. And a good example of this progress is that over 99% of the areas that needed to be covered were covered by a GSA by the June deadline last summer. That was a result of a lot of hard work by GSAs and stakeholders that has built up momentum going into the next major phase of SGMA implementation, which is GSP development. This important phase will require continued planning and technical work within the basins and needs to culminate in a complete GSP submitted to DWR in less than 2 years in the critically overdrafted basins and less than 4 years in the other high and medium priority basins. That's a lot of work in a relatively short amount of time, and the main reason DWR is working hard to provide planning, technical, and financial assistance services that you'll hear about today. So what we'll be covering today are many different topics related to GSP development. We wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of the services that are available to you and you know who to talk to or where to go to take advantage of these services. We'll start with presentations on the GSP requirements and other plan development related information. The GSP development presentations will be followed by presentations on a variety of planning and technical assistance services that are currently available to support GSP development. We'll then have a short break for clarifying questions between the planning and technical assistance talks. And then the last section will be covering other groundwater or SGMA related topics, including an update on DWR's Bulletin 118 activities and information on the recent Proposition 1 Sustainable Groundwater grants. And following all of the presentations will be a longer Q&A session for the remainder of the webinar. So each presentation is generally organized into three main categories. The first are high-level summary of the particular topic, an explanation of the benefits or connections to GSP development or related activities, and then links to DWR contacts or other online resources to get more information. So before we begin the presentations, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Horry from the Center for Collaborative Policy, who is our webinar facilitator today, and Stephanie will go over the webinar instructions and Q&A logistics. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Horry. Like Stephen was saying, I'm just going to spend a brief amount of time going over the logistics for the webinar so you understand how you can participate in today's webinar. As the screen shows, that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted onto DWR's events webpage after the webinar. So for today, we will be taking questions and comments, submitted questions and comments. You can do so via the question box there on your webinar control panel. DWR staff will be keeping a queue of those questions and comments. When we get to the Q&A session, that is when the DWR staff will read your question or comment aloud. So if you are calling in only, then you can email me to receive the presentation slides, so that way you can follow along. My email address is spelled s.horii@csus.edu. It's the same point of contact email that you should have received when you registered for the webinar. And again, the webinar is being recorded, so it will be available on the webpage, on DWR's events webpage. So take-home message, really, if you're having any technical difficulties, feel free to email me and we'll troubleshoot from there. With that, I will turn it over to Trevor.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. My name is Trevor Joseph. I'm one of the program leads here at the department within the SGMA program. Today I'm going to briefly go over the GSP development topic, focusing on some brief intent and items that we feel are important for local agencies to consider at this time. First, I'd like to just focus on a little bit of background. There's kind of two primary overview focus items or themes that we'd like to get across. One is local control. As shown in almost every slide deck that we've prepared, we include the governor's quote at the time that the act was passed or signed. And I'll state it here. A central feature of these bills is the recognition that groundwater management in California is best accomplished locally. And this is very much an important guide, if you will, for how we've implemented and are approaching the implementation of SGMA and all aspects, including GSP development. Another key point here is identification of the specific stakeholders or parties identified in the Act. So there's the Department of Water Resources, the department that I work for. We are the regulatory and assisting agency. There's the State Water Resources Control Board, and you'll briefly hear from Sam Bulletin with the board there, the enforcing agency. Then, of course, there's the Groundwater Sustainability Agencies that have to do the planning and implementation and really have kind of the lion's share of responsibilities within the Act. And finally, there are stakeholders that are involved throughout most of the processes and activities related to SGMA implementation. The other key theme to talk about briefly in more depth, frankly, is sustainability. This is key as SGMA really describes sustainability from a basin or sub-basin level, as well as introduces these important terms, undesirable results. And we'll talk more about what they are and how important it is from the standpoint of implementing and developing groundwater sustainability plans. And the high and medium priority basins shown in orange and yellow are subject to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and have to adhere to those requirements. So one way to kind of describe the implementation of the Act is through these 4 phases. These are not identified in the Act, but something the department developed just to kind of compartmentalize and describe various differences in the way we've been implementing, as well as local agencies, the implementation of the Act. So as Stephen mentioned, we're really beyond phase 1 now with the GSA formation that was very successful, where 99+% of the high and medium priority basins were covered with groundwater sustainability agencies. And we're in phase 2, which is a very challenging aspect of the, or phase of the program, GSP development. And as Stephen mentioned, plans are either due in January 2020 or 2022. Really, I'd like to focus on the GSP regulation articles. This is really the key document, if you will, that describes the requirements outside of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act for local agencies as well as the department in terms of GSP development and how we'll evaluate groundwater sustainability plans. I won't go through each of the 9 articles, but I will focus on the plan content, Article 5, and Article 8, interagency agreements. So for Article 5, plan content, there are 5 sub-articles, and I'll spend a special amount of time on the sustainable management criteria and explain the importance of that sub-article. But the 5 sub-articles laid out here are the requirements for GSAs in preparing groundwater sustainability plans. And this is so that we can do our job of evaluating the technical adequacy of these documents to determine if the plans are likely to achieve sustainability or have already achieved sustainability. So let's briefly go through these. So sub-article 1, administrative information. As the name implies, there's a lot of general information, other information necessary to understand who's preparing the plans, description of maps, and information to, again, provide context in terms of the plan development. But there's also sections related to notice and communication that really describes how GSAs will engage beneficial users and users of groundwater and conduct communication and engagement. Sub-article 2, basin setting. This is more of a technical set of sections and requirements, including the hydrogeologic conceptual model, groundwater conditions, water budget, and management areas. A couple key things to note here is with groundwater conditions, we're really looking for historic and current conditions as it relates to those 6 undesirable results, or we call them actually sustainability indicators, when they're not at significant and unreasonable levels. And that's really important for us to understand the current conditions related to those sustainability indicators, which I'll explain the importance later. Also, I want to kind of just highlight management areas. Management areas are a option for GSAs to use if, in fact, they feel that they would like to look and identify areas in their basin or sub-basin in terms of defining different minimum thresholds or measurable objectives, although there's a series of requirements when doing so. And this is, frankly, something that we've encountered during some of the alternative plan reviews. There's potential for some risk here if management areas aren't prepared accordance to the GSP regulations. So for those of you using or contemplating using management areas in your groundwater sustainability plans, pay a special note to the GSP regulation requirements to ensure that there's a basin-wide definition of sustainability. So sub-article 3, sustainable management criteria. There's a lot of detail in this sub-article. The sections here are really the requirements for a GSA to establish a sustainability goal, define undesirable results with the use of minimum thresholds, and develop measurable objectives, including interim milestones. This is a especially important sub-article. They're all important, but for really defining sustainability, the department's going to need clear and specific and quantifiable definitions of what sustainability means in your sub-basins. So please pay a special note to this sub-article. I'm going to diverge quickly from the GSP regulations and show here a BMP that we developed in draft, it's still in draft, that defines a little more detail in terms of the ways to approach development of SMC. Couple of points to note here is SMC is defined locally and really supports this outcome-driven process to achieve sustainability. So again, we're emphasizing the importance of really looking at this BMP for the purposes of perhaps helping you develop that portion of the GSP regulations. Next slide here shows the undesirable results again, or what we call the sustainability indicators. Just a reminder, they are not undesirable results unless they've exceeded a significant and unreasonable threshold. The importance of these defining undesirable results with the use of that SMC is really the Act requires a sustainability goal, sustainable groundwater management, definition of a sustainable yield, and the definition of sustainable yield really describes the avoidance of undesirable results. So we feel that if you really are accomplishing that baseline goal of avoiding undesirable results, multiple of these other requirements identified on that pyramid are really taken care of. They're addressed. So there's a lot of focus to make sure that you are clearly defining and avoiding undesirable results, and the Act provides you an opportunity to avoid them over a 20-year implementation horizon. In other words, a sustainable yield and the avoidance of undesirable results needs to occur no later than 20 years after implementing your plan. All right, so switching back to the GSP regulations, Subarticle 4, monitoring networks. Again, there's a few sections here in terms including monitoring objectives, developing monitoring protocols, data reporting requirements. But the bottom line is the monitoring network must be able to evaluate the changing conditions in the basin. And again, the changing conditions related to those 6 sustainability indicators. Finally, the last subarticle in Article 5 is projects and management actions. This is a relatively short regulation section or subarticle. And the requirements here in summary are realistic and sufficient projects and actions to achieve sustainability. So we need to have, again, due to our obligation to evaluate whether a plan is likely to achieve sustainability, we need to see projects and management actions that are reasonable and that support that outcome. However, all projects and management actions don't have to be implemented just because they're in your GSP. We recognize that this will be an adaptive management process and the recognition that there's some uncertainty here in terms of how these projects and management actions will achieve that goal over the life of the implementation process or period. So finally, switching now to Article 8, coordination agreements. Coordination agreements includes requirements where there are multiple GSPs developed in the same basin or subbasin. It's required in law that a coordination agreement be developed. And so there's some additional detail in terms of what the department needs to see in that coordination agreement when there's multiple plans in a basin. Key point here is a point of contact, and not to be confused with the term point of contact that you'll hear later today in terms of some of our planning assistance, but a point of contact actually from the basin that the department can rely on to work with within this coordination process. Coordination agreement is also a legal document as well as inclusion of a lot of technical information that must be coordinated at that subbasin scale. And that information is shown here at the bottom of this slide. Also within Article 8 is interbasin agreements. Now this is optional. This is an agreement between 2 basins or subbasins across a boundary line. The department has put this information within the GSP regulations because we encourage a lot of communication and coordination across basin boundary lines or subbasin boundary lines, so that hopefully these plans will not adversely impact an adjacent plan, if you will, to achieve sustainability. That is one of the requirements that the department has in the Act, and we're hoping that these GSPs have coordinated to a certain degree so that when we get plans, they are not going to adversely impact each other. If that occurs and we make that determination, it may not give local agencies a lot of time to make some adjustments before some of the statutory deadlines. All right, second to last slide here, some key points. What I'm calling kind of foundational and fundamental is GSPs must be submitted within the statutory deadline. We get a lot of questions, or starting to get some questions, if we cannot get our plans to the department in time, what happens? And Sam may articulate that a little bit more, but the department cannot give an extension of time. that is really up to the state board to determine how to handle potentially plans received after the statutory deadlines. Plans must be complete. Really encourage local agencies, GSA, stakeholders to develop complete plans. Don't overinvest in any one specific regulatory item or sections, although all sections need to be addressed, but make sure that you develop complete plans for our review. GSPs must cover the entire basin, or as I just referred to, if there's multiple GSPs, they must be submitted together with a coordination agreement. And we're getting a lot of questions if some plans can come in earlier, others later than with the coordination agreement. No, we will not review plans by themselves if there's multiple plans in the same basin or sub-basin until we receive all the plans and the coordination agreement. So at a plan level, kind of what is our expectations? And this, of course, is just a summary. There's a lot of detail in the GSP regulations that I won't address. But one is a demonstration of a path to sustainability. We recognize this might be still somewhat speculative. No plan will go, we think, exactly as originally developed, but a demonstration of a path to sustainability, including those interim milestones, is very important. Also, a clear quantitative definition of sustainability. Going through the sustainable management criteria process provides that clear quantitative definition of sustainability. Again, the GSP should address the requirements in subarticle 5, subarticles 1 through 5, as I just went through. The efforts to develop the GSP have considered the beneficial uses and users of groundwater in the basin. There's multiple references to this in the Act, as well as the GSP regulations. This is definitely a requirement. We recognize also that GSPs will have uncertainty and data gaps, and that's okay. However, again, there's requirements in the regulations that you identify those uncertainties and address data gaps that are significant over time. GSPs will be modified over the 20-year implementation period. Again, as I just mentioned, we totally support this. It's recognized that no plan may go exactly as planned, and there's actually a process for amending GSPs as you work through the 20-year period. This is really a journey and not specifically a requirement just to develop a plan by 2020 or 2022. This is going to be an ongoing process, and we recognize that. So, final point is a GSP will be approved if it satisfies the requirements of SGMA and the GSP regulations. So please make sure you adhere to those requirements. And then my last slide, bouncing back to kind of best management practices and guidance documents, we have prepared 5 more technical BMPs shown here. We also have a series of guidance documents that Simmer will describe on a subsequent slide. But again, BMPs are optional. They're meant as really guidance to help with technical aspects of plan or other aspects of plan development. They're not requirements. The GSP regulations are the requirements. With that, I'll turn it over to Monica, who will take us through GSP initial notification.
Hi, my name is Monica Reese, and I work out of the Sacramento office. And I'm going to talk to you about the importance of GSP initial notification and go over the submittal tool with you. GSP initial notifications are required by SGMA and the GSP regulations, and it's really the first step in the preparation of your GSP. It's important that DWR and the public know that you have started your GSP. And it should be noted that if your plan includes a public water system regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, SGMA does also require that you provide written statement indicating that you're starting your GSP to the Commission as well. Currently, we have 82 notifications submitted statewide. The map shows the darker areas show areas which have submitted their notifications. The lighter gray areas are GSAs which have not yet submitted their notification. So if you're on your way to developing your GSP, please do submit those as soon as possible. So I'll go through the initial notification system. The link is there at the top of the page. It's using the SGMA portal, we have a GSP initial notification system. And you start out by signing into your SGMA portal account. And when you log in, you click on your GSP tab, and you will get a My GSP Initial Notification page. You click on Create an Initial Notification on the blue button, and you'll start populating the fields that come up and run through those questions. If you need to go back to your initial notification, you can click Save and return to your work at a later time. But if you're done, go ahead and click Submit. And once you click Submit, it will trigger an email notification to DWR staff and the GSA point of contact. If you have to go back into your initial notification, the system is flexible in that it allows you to make edits or withdraw. This is a fictitious notification that I created on my account, but this is just for the purposes of showing you how the edits would look. Once you hit edit, you'll be brought back into this form, and here you can make the changes that you need to. You can switch from single to multiple, or you can change the GSAs which are participating in your initial notification. Everything is open to being edited. And once you're done, you can hit Save. Save will not trigger an email notification, or you can hit Submit, and it will trigger an email notification, but both will preserve your changes and post them to the tool. Some additional resources for initial notification can be found on our GSP website. The link is at the top, or you can contact myself or your appropriate regional coordinator. Thank you, and I'll pass it over to Sam.
Hi, my name is Sam Bullen-Bryan with the State Water Resource Control Board's Groundwater Management Program. So I'm kind of responsible for overseeing the board's role in the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. I didn't have any slides, so you'll have to bear with the logo for a little. I just wanted to touch on some kind of key points that I thought were important to emphasize. Kind of just as a quick overview of what the board's role is, so looking to the next deadline. Trevor mentioned that DWR can't change the deadline. And so what that really means is if there is not a plan covering an entire subbasin or multiple plans and a coordination agreement that cover the entire subbasin by 2020 for the critically overdrafted basins or 2022 for all of the other high and medium priority basins, then the State Water Board is given the authority to act. And so I think that's part of the incentive is that most folks would prefer that the new powers and authorities that the State Water Board is provided by SGMA do not become activated by missing that deadline. Just touching on what that process looks like, it is, we would start with a probationary designation, and that designation would be at a hearing, and so we would, of course, kind of listen to everyone, and the hearing would be before the board, and the board would ultimately make the decision on whether to designate the basin probationary. If that were to happen, all of the pumpers within the probationary basin would be subject to reporting requirements, while the Groundwater Sustainability Agency worked on fixing the deficiencies that were identified by the board. If those deficiencies weren't fixed, the State Water Board could move forward with writing its own plan. A couple clarifications on that process. One is that this deadline is different than the 2017 deadline, and that there is no county fallback. And so that's kind of what some folks called what happened in some basins in the June 2017 GSA deadline, is that the county was presumed to be the GSA if there wasn't one. There isn't a process like that for the 2020 or 2022 deadline. So if there's no plan in place that covers the entire subbasin, then the State Water Board's authority becomes active. Kind of another point on on this, the State Water Board's role is we recognize there's a bit of uncertainty around what state intervention means, how it will be applied. And because SGMA is structured so much towards local flexibility and that every basin is going to kind of maybe proceed through the SGMA process slightly differently, the State Water Board's process is certainly going to vary by basin. We don't have kind of a checklist in our back pocket. We're going to recognize that conditions of failure and why the basin failed are going to vary across the state. And our process is certainly solution-oriented. We are not trying to manage groundwater basins into perpetuity. We are going to evaluate why the basin became subject to our authorities and then work to hand back control as quickly as possible, but we want to make sure those deficiencies are fixed. And so if it's an issue like you forgot to include something in the plan, like you didn't consider stream depletions, add that piece into the plan, that fixes the deficiency, the State Water Board is finished. However, if it's a more complicated issue, say you've kind of turned your subbasin into jurisdictional Swiss cheese, and there's a lot of management areas, and those management areas are attempting to displace responsibility for the impacts within the subbasin, and there's a lot of arguing between entities. That's going to be a lot tougher for the State Water Board to resolve in kind of a quick turnaround, and in those cases, it's probably going to make more sense to start with the probationary designation so that we can start collecting the information we need to kind of resolve some of these types of disputes. So kind of keep that in mind, and the importance, as Trevor touched on, of coordination is really a critical aspect of SGMA, and the outcomes that the department is looking for are at the subbasin scale. The State Water Board is approaching it with a similar mindset that these issues and outcomes are at the subbasin scale, and so if there's an attempt to kind of subdivide within that and within a subbasin and displace responsibility onto your neighbors, that's not going to be a path to success under SGMA. Kind of looking forward, my final point was looking forward. We recognize that a lot of folks are working really hard on the plans, and from what we've heard, everyone is putting in a really earnest attempt to get these plans right and get them in by the deadline. But as you're working on the plans, as Trevor touched on, there needs to be a clear path towards sustainability, and to kind of put a finer point on that from the State Water Board's role, what we're really looking for on that path to sustainability are these interim milestones. And as you implement the plans, that's where the State Water Board will be looking, essentially, is how does the department review the implementation of these plans at the 5-year milestones. So we're not kind of lurking every year on year, but at these 5-year check-in points, it is going to be really important that local agencies are able to demonstrate that they're following through on the commitments they made in their initial GSP, and that their levels are responding the way folks thought they would, and the projects are being implemented. So that kind of covers everything I wanted to touch on. If you have any questions about the State Water Board's role, or you would like me or one of my staff to come to your workshops or advisory committees to explain the role of the State Water Board in a little more detailed way, please feel free to contact me at this email address, and I'll hand it over for Samir.
Thank you, Trevor, Monica, and Sam, for providing an overview of SGMA and GSP development. We'll now discuss different types of assistance that are available for GSP development, starting with planning assistance. First up in planning assistance is DWR, or our DWR's communication and engagement. DWR's communications include the biweekly email updates that include updates on the implementation efforts and data and tools that are released, including event announcements. You can subscribe to receive these emails at the link provided. DWR SGMA Groundwater Management website is also a very good resource to have bookmarked. It's where all of our data and assistance and implementation guidance are located. DWR's engagement includes public meetings, presentations at industry conferences, assistance workshops and webinars, We also have regional coordinators and basin points of contact that Paul Wells will introduce to you shortly. And we also have basin-specific GSP development meetings that can be requested through the region offices. DWR also provided guidance on communication and engagement. These are the additional guidance documents that Trevor had referred to earlier. Again, these are not requirements. There are just guidance on how you can meet or how you can approach some of the regulation requirements. DWR also provides facilitation support services. The applications for facilitation support services are evaluated on a continuous basis as funding allows. The funding priorities for the facilitation support services is for critically overdrafted basins without prior DWR facilitation support. And again, funding decisions are made on a continuous basis. So if you are not a critically overdrafted basin, please feel free to apply and we'll keep you in the queue. And as funding becomes available, we'll pull up your application, take a look at it and see if we can help you out. The services that are offered through our facilitation support is stakeholder identification and engagement, public outreach facilitation, GSA meeting facilitation, and all of these are based towards consensus building in your GSP development process. Our assistance and engagement website includes a link and an interactive map where you can go and see which basins have active facilitation support services. This screenshot here shows the map. You would click on a shaded basin and you'd see information about facilitation, contact information, the start and the end date of the facilitation services, and also a DWR contact. If you scroll down in that little box, you'll also be able to download a scope of work for what that facilitation services covers. To apply for facilitation support services, contact the basin point of contact or your regional coordinator, and also visit our website. It has the link to the application. Now with that, I'd like to pass it on to Paul Wells, and he'll explain more about the basin points of contact and the regional coordinators.
Great, thanks, Simmer. As Simmer mentioned, my name is Paul Wells. I'm the regional coordinator for the North Central Region Office, and I'll be talking about the basin points of contact. But first, let me give you a quick introduction on the region offices. DWR provides technical guidance and assistance resources to local and regional organizations through our 4 regional offices. We have regional offices in Red Bluff, West Sacramento, Fresno, and Glendale. These offices have expertise to assist water management groups and the public by providing region-specific guidance and recommendations on a variety of water resources matters, including groundwater and geology, land and water use, surface water, water quality, the environment, flood risk reduction, engineering, design, modeling, and grants. So we provide resources or services on a variety of issues and topics related to water. Today, I'm here to discuss the regional office support for SGMA. So that is the point of contact, and the slide right here shows a map of the basins with points of contact that our Northern Region Office covers. So there are 23 high and medium priority basins on this map. Each medium and high priority basin in California that is required to develop a groundwater sustainability plan has a point of contact assigned to it. The POC's role, or the point of contact's role, is to help coordinate DWR's assistance and engagement with groundwater sustainability agencies, local agencies, and other stakeholders. This assistance and support is provided at the basin level to promote sustainable groundwater management and the development of GSPs. So as I mentioned, this is a slide of our Northern Region Office. It shows the basins that have a POC assigned to them. Each region also has a geology lead for this region office. It's Bill Ehorn, and we also have a regional coordinator. And in this case, Bill Ehorn is also the acting regional coordinator for the Northern Region Office. Here is a slide showing the basins and the points of contact for the North Central Region Office. We have 21 high and medium priority basins that have to develop a groundwater sustainability plan in this region. Bill Brewster is the groundwater lead, and I am the regional coordinator for this area. So all these maps are available online. So if you grab your point of contact right now for your basin, if you're not sure where you are, just write down anyone's name and call us. We'll be happy to put you in touch with the point of contact for your basin. Here is a map showing the points of contact for our South Central region. They have 35 medium and high priority basins that have to develop a groundwater sustainability plan, and also a number of critically overdrafted basins whose plans are due January of 2020. Their groundwater lead is Dane Mathis, and the regional coordinator is Amanda Peisch Derby. And our fourth region is the Southern Region Office. They have 36 high, medium priority basins and 5 points of contact assigned to work with the GSAs in those basins. The geology lead is Tim Ross, and the regional coordinator is Brian Moniz. So I'd like to just take a few moments to discuss what local assistance and engagement efforts include. They basically include day-to-day correspondence. So if you have questions about anything you hear today and you want for your basin, please follow up with your basin point of contact or your regional coordinator with those questions. Email, call us, find us at meetings that we're attending. Just basically, we're there to be engaged and help you find the information you need about DWR support. So support and assistance on planning and technical concerns focus on GSP development, and this assistance can vary greatly from basin to basin. Some basins are still working on governance. Some are well into working on their modeling. Just if you have questions about the facilitation, technical services, just let us know. So the point of contact duties may include providing important SGMA-related updates, so including technical support, regulatory issues, grant opportunities, and facilitation support. We may attend board meetings and advisory group meetings. Our job is to efficiently route questions and requests to appropriate managers and staff at SGMA HQ. And we also are there to help DWR gain a better understanding of common issues that GSAs may encounter as they develop their GSPs. So we will help kind of determine or figure out if there are regional issues that may be a concern and need to be highlighted to management. So resources can be dedicated to addressing those. So I would like to highlight, though, that POCs, point of contacts, are not involved with plan evaluation. We do help put you in touch with the tools and support you may need for local assistance and engagement, but the GSAs, as Trevor mentioned earlier, it's a locally driven effort, and they are responsible for developing and implementing the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, locally controlled. Once the GSP is completed by the GSAs, they will submit it to DWR for review. So in summary, please reach out to us. We're there to provide assistance and help you find the information you need and the tools you need to help develop the GSP. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Stephanie for a brief session of Q&A.
Okay. Oh. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Just for everyone on the webinar, those are the contact information for the regional coordinators. So now we're going to take a few moments for questions for clarification. I'd like to point out that these are clarifying questions on the presentations that you have heard thus far. We will have a longer Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So just as a reminder, in case you happen to forget, you can submit your clarifying questions via the questions box there on your webinar control panel. DWR has been keeping a queue of those questions. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen to moderate.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. Okay, so we have a few questions that have come in. So our colleague Tim Godwin, as part of the SGM program, will be reading off the questions, and our team will be answering those questions. So go ahead, Tim.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Okay, so we got a handful of questions. The first of which is regarding interbasin agreements. Basically, is there a requirement for the interbasin agreements where the GSP relies on water transfers from non-adjacent groundwater basins?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, interbasin agreements are optional. What's provided in the regulations is really some guidance in terms of items that we feel may be important if there is an interbasin agreement developed for the purposes of aiding with having not one plan adversely impact another. So as it relates to water transfers, no, there is no requirement in an interbasin agreement. It may be important to identify that water transfer in your water budget or possibly the projects and actions sections of the GSP regulations, but we would need to know more about the specifics of what you're referring to in order to answer that question with more detail.
Great, thanks, Trevor. Somewhat related to that is a question regarding the use of hydrogeologic models for adjacent basins, in that basically, is there a regulatory requirement that, or guidance, BMPs or other, to ensure that models are complementary and can answer that question regarding interbasin connection of groundwater flow?
There is no regulatory requirement, and we recognize there's a lot of existing models out there, so there is no requirement that all of the models be from the same platform or coordinated across basin boundary lines. Another point here is, models themselves don't prove sustainability necessarily, and that's the importance of the sustainable management criteria and defining with the use of really empirical data what sustainability means in the basin. Although modeling is an important tool to do projections and to understand potential conditions in your basin, there is no need or there's no requirement to align it across basin boundaries. That being said, you may wish to do so, but it's not a requirement. And to be honest, I need to go back to the modeling BMP to see if we have additional guidance on that. It's possible that we do.
Great, thanks. I guess here's another one, somewhat again related, regarding the development of water budgets. Are all groundwater pumpers required to install flow meters?
No, not in accordance with the Act or the GSP regulations. There is no requirement that flow meters be installed from the state's documents. However, GSAs may wish to and require that meters be installed locally. And it's probably important to recognize that really meters are likely the best way to obtain that data that feeds into a water budget. And again, I think we have some guidance in the water budget section of the BMPs that discusses flow meters, but there is no requirement from the state's perspective in the GSP regulations or the law.
Excellent. Maybe I'll turn the page here. How is the department going to review and engage or consider the stakeholder engagement component of the regulation?
Right. So as I mentioned in one of the opening slides, stakeholder engagement is very much identified in the Act and in the regulations, and is an important part of not only the GSP development, but the aforementioned GSA formation. And there are legal requirements, including public notification, identification of interested parties lists, and others in the Act. There are also requirements in the GSP regulations, including the aforementioned communication and engagement section or of sub-article 1 of Article 5. And then there are multiple references to requirements of descriptions of how beneficial uses and users were engaged and considered, I should say, in the development of both undesirable results and minimum thresholds. So it's definitely a requirement in the Act and in the regulations, and therefore will need to be met.
Great. So in the interest of keeping the presentation moving along, we're going to answer one more question. We have other questions. We'll pull some of these back so we can coordinate them and have have responses in a coordinated fashion to get there. But this last question is regarding an alternative plan. For the basins that filed an alternative plan, will DWR let them know whether or not they need to do a full GSP if they aren't successful with their alternative?
Yeah, so we really didn't cover alternatives. There was an option for local agencies or GSAs to submit an alternative by January 1st, what year was that? 2017? All right. And we received actually, I think, 22 separate submissions. 4 have been pulled. I think we're evaluating 18 currently. That process is still ongoing. So if we determine that alternative to be approved, then there's a requirement that that submitting agency update that alternative and resubmit it every 5 years, as well as complete and provide the department annual reports. And actually, we just received annual reports for the alternative submittals by April 1st of this year. If the alternative is deemed inadequate, then it's up to the local agency to determine if they want to, if they haven't already, formed a GSA and complete a groundwater sustainability plan.
Great. I think that's all we have for right now. We'll continue. Please keep the questions coming, and we'll organize these so they're consistent, and we'll return back to the presentations.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Trevor. This is Stephen Springhorn again. So the next set of presentations will be on technical assistance. We'll have 4 topics. So the first will be technical support services. The next will be some of the new and existing data and tools we have available. The third will be SGMA climate change guidance and data. And then the fourth will be some existing and new DWR modeling tools. So I'd like to start just by thanking the DWR team that spans multiple divisions within DWR, our consulting team, and other collaborators that have worked really hard to develop the data sets, the tools and services that we'll be discussing today in this topic. So technical support services are now available. They were just opened up essentially this week, and we are looking to have applications come in from Groundwater Sustainability Agencies. The applications will be evaluated on a continuous basis and as funding allows. So as Simmer mentioned in the facilitation support services, these technical support services are very similar to that process, but just on more technical items. So where the TSS program fits into the overall DWR SGMA technical assistance. The first component of our technical assistance is really guidance and education. This is driving at a common understanding of the new rules of SGMA and where to get information on our website, other agencies' websites, as well as the best management practices and guidance documents that were mentioned earlier. The second component of technical assistance are these support services, and this is more one-on-one coordination between DWR and the GSAs in the basins across the state. And these services can help fill data gaps and help with different field activities and modeling and tools. Then the third component, which we'll touch on next, is the statewide data sets and tools. So there are some minimum standards that are out there for the technical support services. First is that we're asked, these are only available to GSAs. Those GSAs must submit a GSP initial notification that Monica went over earlier. We're looking for a single contact for each basin or sub-basin. And related to that, we're looking for coordination within each basin or sub-basin that is requesting or would be requesting these technical services. So some of the funding priorities and timeline. So our initial priority in funding and work in this program is within the critically overdrafted basins. So those basins that are colored purple there on the map on the screen. After we get applications in and see what the how many applications and all of that have come in on those critically overdrafted basins, then we will be reaching out or expanding this to the other high and medium priority basins in the state. Other funding priorities are on technical services that are addressing data gaps and technical needs in the basins that are applying for them. And funding decisions, as I mentioned, will be on a continuous basis. So we do have to manage expectations here. We don't have an unlimited budget, unfortunately, and that budget is going to be used in the critically overdrafted basins first initially. So just an overall timeline is, as I mentioned, the applications are open now, and I'll tell you how to apply for these. It'll be an open filing. We'll spend some time seeing what the initial applications are that are submitted, and we'll start to review those applications and then implement those services. So the type of services that we're offering, they are broken into two main categories. The first are field activities, such as monitoring well installation. This is our ability to leverage our drilling contracts in the state to install dedicated monitoring wells in groundwater basins. Also, groundwater level training. If there's areas that need help with how to monitor wells and that type of activity, we'd be leveraging the expertise in our regional offices. Also, one of the services is the well video logging. So this is if you already have existing wells out there that could be turned into monitoring wells. We have the ability, working with our regional offices and the contractor, to video log some of these wells. And then there is a category of other field activities. This is where we're willing to work with GSAs to see what type of technical services make most sense or are in critical need in the basins, and we can work with you on that. The other major category is modeling and tools. And this really is related to the new modeling and tools that Tyler Hatch will talk about in a little bit. But this is where we're trying to get those modeling tools out as soon as we can, put those into the hands of the GSAs and stakeholders, and provide some training opportunities to have folks understand how to use those models. This will not be DWR running models for local agencies. This will be more putting the tools and training into the hands of the GSAs and others. So in order to apply for the TSS, it's a three-step process. The first is to select a groundwater basin coordinator. This individual would be someone who understands the basin-wide GSP technical needs, basin or sub-basin-wide GSP technical needs and collaboration efforts, would be responsive to DWR's requests for information, because there will be a lot of back and forth between DWR and the GSA, and demonstrates some form of support within the basin or sub-basin from the GSAs in that basin or sub-basin. Now, this basin coordinator is not required to be the local point of contact. That's a defined term in the GSP regulations, or the plan manager. It can be, but it has to be someone that is affiliated with the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. The next step is basin-wide or sub-basin-wide general application. So this describes general basin or sub-basin information. It articulates the most challenging technical needs of the basin or sub-basin, and you can think of this as an umbrella application for the whole basin or sub-basin. Once that general application is in, there can be multiple service requests that address the technical needs in the basin. So for instance, a service request could come in for installation of a monitoring well, as well as another one for modeling training. And that way we can be processing those individual requests quicker, and there might be a need or the situation where one might be approved and one might be not approved or put on hold, depending on our availability of funding and workload. So how to apply for technical support services. As Simmer mentioned and Paul mentioned, please contact your DWR basin point of contact or regional coordinator. They have information and have an understanding of this new program. And we also have a website where there's more information with a fact sheet and some other ways to contact us, as well as a list of the application questions that we'll be posting. So now I'd like to shift gears a little bit. I'll be talking about a new mapping application called the SGMA Data Viewer, and some other new or existing data and tools. So as I mentioned earlier, these tools fit into the third component of our overall technical assistance, and this is more where the department is working internally to get these data sets, regional or statewide data sets, out to all of you, and once they're available, they're on our website, available for everyone to use. So the good news is that there's a lot of information out there on groundwater or SGMA relevant information. The bad news is it's spread out across many different websites in many different locations. So the first step that we took was to compile all that information or SGMA relevant information as much as we could onto one website. And that's the website shown here. There's a link at the top of the screen as well as a screenshot here. At this location or this web page, you can download groundwater and related data sets, look at the interactive maps that we have available, as well as climate change data and tools that Tyler will touch on, and also modeling tools and other maps and reports. So it's our initial attempt to make this information more accessible or more efficient to access. So I'd just like to highlight a few of the applications that are either that have been on that website or recently added to the website. So the first is our statewide land use data viewer. This has been out there for a little bit, but it provides access to statewide as well as regional land use data, and we're seeing that this is being used quite a bit, and that's a good sign because a lot of this information, if we zoom in here, says land use information for the state. This information can be used for GSP development. There are a number of GSP requirements that are related to land use, and this information can help to inform those decisions and GSP development. Again, you don't have to use this information. It's just available for your use if needed. And you can download this information by the whole statewide GIS file, or by county or by groundwater basin, so you can get the information in the format or the area that you need. The next statewide data set is a new one that has come up recently, is well logs. This is working with our OSCAR or well log program. And the department has always been the steward of well completion reports. So anytime a well is drilled in the state, we have it's required that well log goes to us. So we've had this information. More recently, there's been activities to make those well logs more available and easily accessible. So this is this interactive map that you see here. This is a view of well logs per square mile, which happens to be one of the GSP regulation requirements, is a map of well information per square mile. So this is just allowing folks to see what is in our database and if it potentially could be useful for you to use in your GSP development. You can zoom in and see what the statistics are for each one of those square miles or sections. Again, what the tabular data we have in our database, as well as getting to the actual well completion report. An important note that this data set or database does not show the well owner information, and that's by design, because there's a state law that prohibits that information from being disseminated. A new tool that came on recently onto the website, that's been the culmination of quite a bit of work over a few years, is what's called the Natural Communities Commonly Associated with Groundwater, or for short, Natural Communities Dataset. This data set is a compilation of 48 publicly available state and federal agency data sets that map vegetation, wetlands, springs, and seeps in California, and a working group comprised of DWR, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Nature Conservancy reviewed and compiled data sets and conducted a screening process to exclude vegetation and wetlands types less likely to be associated with groundwater, and retain types commonly associated with groundwater. So the use of this natural communities data set is not mandatory, and GSAs may use this data set or other available data to inform the identification of groundwater-dependent ecosystems. And it's another interactive map where you can view different parts of the groundwater basins in the state and click and get more information. So moving on to the SGMA Data Viewer. So this is another new tool that launched this Monday. The SGMA Data Viewer compiles and provides access to groundwater data sets. Again, if the first step was compiling the information on our website, this next step we took was to try and make that information more accessible by putting it on an online map interface where you can zoom into the area of your interest. We're leveraging a new California Natural Resources Agency open data platform, which was rolled out, and there's been hard work to get that out over this last year or two. And if you haven't seen that open data platform yet, I highly recommend checking that out. That has a number of groundwater related data sets and others that might be applicable for your planning efforts. And you can actually get direct access or link up to some of these data sets right into your applications or put them into your database. So that's another good piece of information or a place to go to get information. So the goal of the SGMA Data Viewer was to organize the information in the way that it's needed for SGMA and the GSP regulations. So trying to organize it in the way that you'll need it for your plan development or implementation. So, and we feel by doing that, it'll make it more efficient for you to incorporate that information into the plan development. And then we are working on this. We got the first phase out with the information that I'll show in a second, but we plan to further enhance this data viewer over time as more information comes in, because as we all know, there's going to be a lot of information generated by SGMA, and so we want to have an organized place to place it. So here's a look at the SGMA Data Viewer. So on the left-hand side, the different data categories are organized by groundwater levels, groundwater storage, water quality, land subsidence, surface water, water budget, and hydrogeologic conceptual model, and some boundaries. And I'll touch on each one of these categories. So under the groundwater levels, we have a direct link to our statewide periodic groundwater level measurement database. So a lot of the work that you've done on CASGEM or other related efforts, that information is brought into here. We also have a link to our DWR continuous groundwater measurements for our dedicated monitoring sites in the state. And we've also linked to the United States Geological Survey periodic groundwater measurements. So you can zoom into an area, hover over a point, look at the trend of the hydrograph, and get some information. You can click on that point to get more information on the well, see the hydrograph, interactively zoom into that hydrograph, as well as download that information on the well. There's also a new pretty powerful search tool on the periodic groundwater level measurements. So you can select a basin. For instance, the basin we're sitting in today is the South American. You could select filter by subbasin or basin, select South American, and you'll be able to search and download in a zip file right there all the information on the wells and water levels we have in our database. You can also filter by other parameters that are on the screen there, such as date range or depth information, or your own user-defined area of interest. In groundwater storage, there's relatively limited information here. That's a link to our some of our modeling tools that Tyler will touch on, but we feel that a lot of information will be coming from the GSAs in this area, and we'll be posting that information as it comes in. Related, water quality, here's some links to the State Board GeoTracker Gamma website and some other water quality links that might be useful related to water quality. Land subsidence, we have DWR extensometers, USGS extensometers, UNAVCO continuous GPS sites, and some of our NASA INSAR data sets that were published a few years ago that are accessible, and you can zoom into your area and download your area of interest. On the interconnected surface water side, we have connection to the CDEC, or California Data Exchange Center stations, such as river flow, river stage, reservoirs, and snow sensors. On the water budget side, this is where the climate change data sets are housed, and Tyler will touch on that. We also have our land use data set, the statewide data set here as well. And then on the hydrogeologic conceptual category, we've got recharge maps from some external sources, soil information, geologic maps, and fault maps. So there is a lot of information on this site, but it's aligned to a lot of the requirements that are in the Groundwater Sustainability Plan regulations. And we're making the information that we have available for your use. Again, you don't have to use this information, but it's there for you if you were wanted to use it. So then the last category is the boundaries. And so this has a number of jurisdictional boundaries, such as groundwater basins or counties, and the GSA's boundaries that we have in our data system. You can click anywhere here, get more information in this data table, and download either the full data set or individual counties or groundwater basins. So in closing, we're trying to create ways for GSAs and others to access data efficiently, coupling that with the tools that are related to SGMA. Likely there'll be a lot of local data that is in the basins or groundwater basins in the state, because a lot of local agencies have a much better understanding of the groundwater basins. That information will go into a GSP, which will be submitted through one of our other data systems, the SGMA portal. And there are a few of the data streams coming out of that. We'd like to close the loop, and for instance, groundwater levels or some of the other data streams that we'll be getting on a regular basis, we'd like to update the SGMA data viewer so we have a good look at the current status of groundwater conditions in the state. So if you're interested in the SGMA data viewer or other tools, please visit our DWR Data and Tools webpage, where you'll find links to the map viewers I discussed today and many other data and tools or fact sheets. So now I'll hand it over to Tyler Hatch to talk about climate change. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. So my name is Tyler Hatch, and I work for the Sustainable Groundwater Management Program here at headquarters at DWR. And so one of the projects that I've been working on has been in the development of climate change data tools and guidance. So as Stephen mentioned previously, it falls into the technical assistance category for tools and data, with the first thing being the data provided. So we have several different types of data. We have a gridded statewide data set that covers precipitation and evapotranspiration. These are in change factor form, so they're to be able to be used locally and multiplied by your historical data for those areas. We also have Central Valley flows and diversions, which cover effectively the calcium footprint for the Central Valley. For areas outside the Central Valley, we have ungauged watershed stream flow change factors. So in areas where we don't have gauge records or things, then locals can use that type of information to use with their own local information and be able to see how stream flow and runoff may change through climate conditions. All of this data is accessible now through the SGMA data viewer, and that's underneath the water budget sub-tab on the left panel. So in addition to climate change data, we have tools that go along with that data. We have both a spreadsheet tool for certain statistical corrections that may be due to the scale of the information provided, since the grid is on a 6 kilometer by 6 kilometer grid for the precipitation and ET. Then we also have some ArcGIS toolboxes specifically geared towards numerical modeling applications. So we have our internal IWFM model, as well as the ModFlow USGS model that we have a tool that can be used to facilitate the use of our data when it's downloaded from the data viewer into those modeling applications. As far as guidance goes, we have a guidance document that was posted on our Data and Tools website earlier this week, and it focuses in on what the data is and how it was developed, including the models used, the processing steps, and methods. It also covers the where it'll be applicable to you for GSA development, which is in the projected water budgets area. And then it also lists out and talks about the data and approach assumptions and limitations. So we have effectively this process that's been developed. The data itself was initially developed by the Water Commission for their Prop 1 Water Storage Investment Program, and DWR was the technical lead for data development. And so the SGMA program has adopted that data and that approach for consistency across different state programs. So what we would like to do is, since we have this guidance document posted on our website, we have a 30-day period allotted where we'd invite some feedback from the public to get an idea of whether this guidance document is clear and useful for your purposes. And then we'd like to try to address some of those to make it as useful as possible for you and your GSA. So as I mentioned, all of these resources can be found through the Data and Tools page, specifically the guidance document, but you'll also be able to find the link to the SGMA data viewer as well on the Data and Tools webpage. So moving on to another topic that is slightly related, we have the C2VSIM model, which is being updated currently. And along with that, this is a IWFM model application that, so IWFM, for those who don't know, is a integrated hydrologic model software that was written and developed here at DWR. And it's been around for roughly 20 years. So we have the C2VSIM model, which covers the Central Valley of California. And so we've recently been undertaking activities to update this to the latest version of the software, as well as extending our input data through 2015. In the process, we've also updated the texture analysis, land use, surface water deliveries, and we've done work in the process of calibrating the root zone and water demands. And then we're undergoing still some of the calibration using automated process using the software PEST. So in terms of the applicability of C2VSIM fine grid for GSP planning, so within our regulations, we say that we're going to provide both C2VSIM as an application and IWFM as a software for agencies to use in the development of their water budget. As in doing so, we're trying to make sure that it's up to date and useful for your purposes. And we think it'll be a valuable tool for water budgets in complex hydrogeologic conditions, and specifically in relation to historical water budgets, projected water budgets, and potentially evaluation of projects and management actions. So our program has been providing funding and working closely with the consultant to try to make sure that we get this model out to you sooner. So the planned release schedule, and some of you may already be aware that we have a early release or pre-calibration version that's been available for almost a month for informational and trading purposes only. And this was done under a user agreement such that it was noted that it's not ready for GSP application. Then here in the next week or so, we plan to have a beta release that will be usable by locals for the development of GSPs or just local studies, with the idea that it's likely going to need some local data input and modification for your use, but we'll have some data development documentation as well as spatial data that goes along with that beta release model. So more to follow on that on our, the links will be up on our data and tools website when that's active. The final release of the model is planned for fall of 2018, and at that point we'll have a full model development report as well as including the calibration metrics and results for that. So C2VSIM FineGrid and IWFM resources are all through DWR, so these websites include some fact sheets and other information related to the models and their affiliated tools. So please refer to those, or you can reach out to me with any questions you have. And I'll pass it off now to Chris Bonds to talk about SVSIM.
Thanks, Tyler. Once again, my name is Chris Bonds. I'm a senior engineering geologist here in DWR Sacramento. Work for the Division of Integrated Regional Water Management. And I'm going to talk to you today about the Sacramento Valley Groundwater Surface Water Simulation Model, otherwise known as SVSIM. So this is a model that uses the IWFM modeling code. It's basically an enhancement of the C2VSIM model specific to the Sacramento Valley. And the purpose of this model is to support SGMA implementation, including evaluation of sustainability criteria or undesirable results, including surface water depletions, lowering groundwater levels, and reduction of storage, and also evaluating historical and future water budgets, and evaluating future projects and management actions. And on the right side of your screen, this is a oblique view of the model. Again, it covers the Sacramento Valley area, and you can see the black areas on the surface of the Sacramento Valley. That's basically the grid. That's a very, very refined grid along surface water features in the Sacramento Valley. And on the cross section there, you can see that is the layering that's in the model. And this model has 9 layers compared to C2VSIM, which has 3. So the location of the SVSIM model, it covers the Sacramento Valley Groundwater Basin in green there. It also covers the Redding area groundwater basin in purple at the top. It covers the Delta groundwater basins in the lower left, and also a small portion of the San Joaquin Valley groundwater basin here in the bottom center. So as far as the scope of work and schedule, we started this modeling effort in spring of 2015. We conducted a modeling needs assessment and testing phase. That was our phase 1. And we're currently in phase 2 of model development. Again, we started following phase 1, fall of 2015, and we'll be continuing with this effort through summer of 2018. It includes 4 tasks: hydrogeologic conceptual model and aquifer parameters. That's task 1. Task 2 is development of the model grid. Development of the model input files is task 3, and then we're currently working on task 4, which is the model calibration and sensitivity analysis. So as far as documentation and data for this model, we have 3 technical memos, or TMs, documenting SVSIM development. They're called TM1A, which is the modeling needs assessment and testing. TM1B is the hydrogeologic conceptual model and aquifer parameters. And TM2, which is the model grid development. So those are currently posted on our DWR data and tools website. The final 2 technical memos covering development of input parameters and calibration and sensitivity analysis will be posted this summer. And another thing I wanted to point out is we have all of the Sacramento Valley texture and initial aquifer parameter data that was used during the hydrogeologic conceptual modeling process. That data will be posted on the DWR Data and Tools webpage in the near future for GSA use in the Sacramento Valley. And if you have any specific questions about this new tool, SVSIM, you can contact me. I'm the project manager, or you can contact DWR's lead modeler on the project, which is Linda Bond. And on the lower left there, that is the location you can go to access the SVSIM specific tech memos. And also wanted to mention that this Monday we published a fact sheet on SVSIM. So if you're interested in determining if this model would be useful for your purposes, definitely go to our webpage and pull up the fact sheet, and you can look and get a flavor for the information in the model and the schedule and so forth. And so that concludes this section of the webinar. I'm now going to transition over to Brett Wyckoff, who's going to talk to you about some other groundwater topics, including Bulletin 118.
Hi, this is Brett Wyckoff. I'm with DWR headquarters in Sacramento, the SGMA program, and I'm going to talk about Bulletin 118. For those of you who haven't heard of Bulletin 118, Bulletin 118 is a summary of available information on California's groundwater to help those who make decisions affecting the protection, use, and management of the resource. And the authority for producing Bulletin 118 comes from Water Code Section 12924, and it basically gives DWR the authority to identify California groundwater basins and based on the geologic or hydrogeologic conditions and political boundaries, but also investigate groundwater extraction and recharge, and identify basins subject to critical conditions of overdraft. And then in 2009, there was additional provisions in the Water Code added to report the findings to the governor and legislature in 2012, and then every 5 years and years ending in 5 or 0. And then in 2014, with the SGMA legislation, they added the provision to give DWR the authority to revise basin boundaries as needed. And then California's Bulletin 118 has been published sporadically over the years, primarily due to availability of funding. But this graphic shows you the years that it was published, but also it shows you that over time the information on California's groundwater basins has increased. The number of basins has increased up until 2003, which was the latest full version of Bulletin 118 that was published. And the information that known about these basins has increased over time as well. And then in 2013, the California Water Plan tasked DWR with enhancing the information available on California's groundwater basins. And so we added a lot of new content on groundwater basins, and it's not officially a Bulletin 118 document, but it did increase substantially the amount of information available and became the most comprehensive statewide analysis of groundwater conditions. It wasn't released until 2015, so it does have a little bit of information on the SGMA, and so we included that, but we also broke it down into hydrologic regions, and the information rolled up from each region into a statewide summary. We included comprehensive discussions of groundwater supply development management, the distribution of wells, extent of monitoring, data gaps. We had maps of groundwater levels and subsidence monitoring. We included aquifer conditions summaries and groundwater use, and then for the first time we developed a change in storage tool and used that to map the change in storage in the Central Valley over a period of time. And then we included inventories of groundwater management plans and conjunctive use projects. So this comprehensive summary of California groundwater information in 2013 is, we feel that it's going to be the foundation for comprehensive Bulletin 118 updates in 2020 and thereafter. I'll just go through this quickly. The California Water Action Plan came out before SGMA and basically had us specify that DWR do many of the same things that were rolled into SGMA, and there's a list of those here. And SGMA came along in 2014, and some of the key provisions affecting Bulletin 118 within SGMA was that DWR determined conditions of critical overdraft, establish a basin boundary modification process, reprioritize Bulletin 118 basins using additional factors, and all of those would be rolled into Bulletin 118. In 2016, we needed to publish the critically overdrafted basins and basin boundary revisions, so we published the interim update 2016, and we have also been working on updating the Bulletin 118 website, and we want to make it a living Bulletin 118 document, basically, on the website, and include recent developments, linkage to related SGMA activities, including results of basin boundary modification process, critically overdrafted basins, and the latest basin prioritization. And then we want to have an archive of historical Bulletin 118 documents, as well as access to the current document, and provide GIS data and metadata to the public. And then we want to use mapping tools to access Bulletin 118 basin information spatially, be able to view and explore basin boundaries and access the descriptions of the basins. And then comprehensive Bulletin 118 updates, like I said, they'll be every 5 years, beginning in the first one in 2020. And then we're going to build on the existing groundwater update 2013. And then we'd like to continually improve our understanding of the basins and California's groundwater conditions, and provide information and tools to assist those who are involved with groundwater management. And also to integrate SGMA information status and progress, and work with the California Water Plan to provide groundwater information that could be used within their water plan updates, and then provide findings and recommendations to improve groundwater management. We also will be updating basin reports, and those are the basin descriptions as were included with Bulletin 118 2003 update, and those are available online on our website, and they have a lot of information on the individual basins, the basin settings, hydrogeology, what monitoring going on within the basins, the groundwater budget if known, and what type of storage within the basin, and any management activities going on. And we're going to update those reports on a prioritized basis. And what we like to do is start with the high and medium priority basins subject to SGMA, and then include the low and very low priority basins as funding is available and by priority. And so we want to work with agencies to make sure the information going into these reports is accurate and identify available information. And we want to integrate groundwater sustainability plans and annual reports, the information from those to update these basin reports will make them very robust, and a lot of new information coming into those. And then we'll have the basin reports. They'll continue to be available by individual basins on the website and through our mapping applications. And as I said, we'd like to update all basin reports, but it may take several years because there's several basins, as you know. So long-term vision for Bulletin 118 is we want to continue to be the go-to statewide referenced document for groundwater management in California, and we want to integrate SGMA information and document implementation. We want to make Bulletin 118 continually more robust and integrate that information from GSPs and have a more accurate picture of groundwater conditions in California and identify any trouble spots. We want to work with the California Water Plan and continue to provide information to them for more accurate accounting of regional water balances and inform decision makers of statewide and regional needs. And so also we want to integrate additional information on groundwater sources that beyond alluvial basins for a truly comprehensive compendium on California's groundwater. In 2003, volcanics were removed from Bulletin 118, but we want to restore that information in 2020, and then also start compiling information on fractured bedrock aquifers. And so the emergence of SGMA and the heightened attention to groundwater has given DWR an opportunity to fine-tune Bulletin 118 to meet the needs of groundwater planners and a diverse stakeholder community. And we've learned a lot of lessons implemented from previous Bulletin 118s, and we're going to benefit from those. And so these are some of the upcoming events related to the 2020 Comprehensive Bulletin 118 update. Right now, we're in discussions with stakeholders and cooperating agencies and kind of getting some feedback from them. And in 2018, the second round of basin boundary modifications will be completed, and then there'll be another reprioritization of groundwater basins based on those boundaries. We'll draft the Bulletin 118 comprehensive update in 2018 and 2019, and release a public review draft in summer 2020, and then have the final update in fall of 2020. And then right now, we're ongoing activities, or we're coordinating with the California Water Plan and SGMA program, updating our website for Bulletin 118, and on all our archived documents and current Bulletin 118 are available there. And we're updating basin reports for California groundwater basins. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jason Brabeck, and we'll talk about the grant program.
Thank you, Brett. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, my name is Jason Brabeck. I'm with the Division of Integrated Regional Water Management and part of the Financial Assistance Branch. And so, as most of you know, we Prop 1, the Sustainable Groundwater Grant Program, on April 4th, 2018, we submitted out or released our final awards for this solicitation period, and $85.8 million was awarded, with $16.2 million to projects that directly benefited severely disadvantaged communities. And more important for most of everybody on this webinar is that $69.6 million was awarded for development of GSPs. One thing to note that 3 of the grant recipients have submitted an alternative plan to DWR, so those awards are tentative at this time. This is just a figure that shows the general representation of where all the basins that are covered based on this latest award. Most of the state of California and these basins are covered in this grant award, with about 75% of the identified basins covered. Next steps is that DWR has submitted out commitment letters to each of the applicants as grant recipients for this work. And in those commitment letters, or award notification letters as we also call them, there'll be information for the grant recipients to be able to move forward on the preparation and development of their grant agreement. One thing to note is on the slide here is a link to there's going to be a template of the agreement. So I'd recommend everybody look at that agreement template to start looking at what your terms and conditions are going to be for this grant agreement. Also, too, is for your next step is start compiling your work plan, schedule, and budget based on the proposal that you submitted, so that all that information can be together. Because once these commitment letters go out, it'll be also partially dependent on our time about how fast we can turn around these executed agreements, is the information that's returned back from each of the grant recipients. And we'll try to turn these agreements around as soon as possible once we get the information and everything is copacetic on the information that's provided therein. Just to highlight as well is that the cost share is all the way back to January 1st, 2015, and eligible work for grant reimbursement is dated from July 1st, 2017 on. And that pretty much concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll hand it on over to Stephanie.
All right, thank you, Jason. All right, now we are going into our main Q&A session. I've seen several quite a few questions coming in, which is wonderful. So we'll spend the remaining time of this webinar for going through that Q&A. And again, it's the same process. If you have a question or comment that you would like to share, please enter it into that questions box there on your GoToWebinar control panel. And with that, I'll turn it over to DWR staff to go over the Q&A.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. So like last time, we'll have this Q&A session where Tim will be reading the questions and our team will be answering them.
All right, Tim. Great. So thank you all for continuing to submit questions. We've been trying to organize them in a fashion that hopefully we can cover a lot of ground here in a short amount of time. So generally, right up front, a question about the data viewer. What about the data set itself? The data sets themselves, are they subject to quality control? How should GSP prepares? What can they assume about the quality of these data sets? Where do they stand?
All right, thanks for that question. So the data viewer is essentially a window to accessing the source information from individual data sets. So for instance, for groundwater levels, I'm showing on the screen here the Sigma data viewer, the live look. So the DWR periodic groundwater level measurements. That is a live link into our CASGEM database. So the QC portions of that data are from the CASGEM program. And so to get an idea of where the source of the information is coming from for all of these individual layers, there's a little info icon just to the right of each layer, and you can click on that to get more information about what that data layer is, where it's coming from, and who to contact for more information. So I think a lot of the information that you might be looking for the quality control will be in this information, or you'll be able to contact folks for more information. As it relates in general to who's responsible for the quality control, it really is the responsibility of the GSA to adhere to the monitoring, technical, and reporting standards within the GSP regulations. And that's Article 3 of the GSP regulations, if you're interested in more of those. What are the technical and reporting standards, which includes monitoring protocols and data and reporting standards.
All right, great, thank you. Our format of the data sets that are in the data viewer, are there any other formats that this is provided in, such as Google Earth formats, KMZs, KMLs, that kind of data?
Yes. So when you click on any individual point, there's a data table that comes up here on the screen, and when you click download, you have options to download the full data set in a spreadsheet format or shapefile, and then filtered data set. So what you have filtered, you can download in a shapefile, spreadsheet, or KML. Related to that, so those are point data. So all the GIS related data sets, so a lot of the boundaries here, for instance, groundwater basin boundaries. If you click on one of those, again, in the download, you can download the KML file. So that will open right up in Google Earth.
Excellent. Related to these data sets, a question about the natural communities data set and how it may relate to the potential groundwater dependent ecosystem data set under development by the TNC. How they differ? Are they the same? How do they relate?
So the short answer is they're the same. And so that one data set that's called the natural communities commonly associated with groundwater, or the NC data set, is the data set that the work group that I mentioned earlier from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Nature Conservancy, along with DWR, worked to develop. And that is the data set that DWR is hosting on our infrastructure here at the department and is stewarding that data set.
Excellent. Maybe some clarifying statement here regarding I think there's some confusion about all of this information you provided. There's some misunderstanding that maybe these are multiple websites where this data is stored. How maybe you can summarize very quickly all of this information.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, that's not the first time I've been told I'm confusing. So that's a good question because it's a lot of information, a lot of links that we were going through. But what we tried to do is organize those links into one spot. And so this is the main DWR homepage. If you go to Programs, Groundwater Management, and then on the right side of the screen, you'll see Data and Tools. This is the Data and Tools webpage that I mentioned. And so all the links that I showed on my presentation and a lot of the other presentations today are available on this website. So the data bases, the Open Data Platform, Sigma Portal are here. Under Mapping, the Sigma Data Viewer, the NC Data Set Viewer, Land Use Viewer, they're all here with more information on what they are and some fact sheets and other information. So those links are all organized in this one spot.
Are we planning on putting a link to the Sigma Data Viewer in the portal itself as well?
We are considering putting some way to go from the Sigma portal to this information on the Sigma Data Viewer.
Great, great. A little bit about all of this data and the requirements for reporting and storing this information for GSAs. Is the department planning on providing any sort of guidance to describe what a data management system or DMS could or should be for Sigma?
Yes, so we are looking into that. There's two components to that question. The first is guidance on the data management system, and we are working on that to try and provide some information and also compile existing information. For an example, the CASGEM Groundwater Level Monitoring Network, that whole program has already established standards on how to upload groundwater level data, and so we'll be leveraging a lot of that existing information. So there isn't a definitive timeline on when that guidance document is out, but we are working on it. On a related note, on the topic of how GSAs will be reported to the department through the Sigma portal, we are developing fact sheets on how GSAs will be submitting their GSP to us, which is related on a related topic.
Great.
Again, that will be coming.
Great. So a question relating to one of the data sets or sustainability indicators here, and that's that of subsidence, and in particular in severely overdrafted basins where we're seeing subsidence occur in some instances. How do we track that? How can agencies monitor that? What sorts of ability have we provided for them to continually monitor that, and what guidance, I guess, is out there?
So there's a couple different components to this. The first is, what are the requirements for monitoring subsidence? And so all GSPs in all of the basins, high and medium basins, not just the critically overdrafted basins, have requirements to monitor subsidence if it's applicable. So there's information on the monitoring network of what's required to have monitoring networks related to subsidence. Other GSP requirements related to subsidence and tracking that is in the sustainable management criteria, where Trevor went over earlier. So I'd suggest looking at the GSP regulations in the monitoring network, which is sub-article 4 of Article 5 of the regs, and then also the draft sustainable management criteria, BMP. As it relates to information we're providing on subsidence, the Sigma Data Viewer has a land subsidence category where we have that information I showed earlier on the extensometers and some INSAR imagery, where we're offering that up if folks would like to see what we have, and they could add their own information to that.
Great. And a related question here, Chris, maybe you could help us out. Another tool that we've developed, SVSIM, is there any capacity or plan to look at modeling subsidence conditions?
Yeah, so we have been looking into that. The model that we make available this summer, it may not have that capability included. because we are in the process of reviewing some of the IWFM code related to land subsidence. And we're also looking at some of the land subsidence monitoring data in the Sacramento Valley to extract some useful information out of that and take some of that information and put it back into the model in order to make sure that those parameters are up to date. So eventually, subsidence will be included, subsidence modeling will be included in the model.
Excellent, thanks.
And just a quick note on the SVSIM model, and for more information, on that same Data and Tools webpage, under the Modeling tab in the middle of the screen, under Modeling Applications, there's more information on the items Chris described earlier.
Great, thanks. That's a lot of information about the data and tools we have available to assist people with GSPs and moving forward. The next couple of questions, we're going to turn the page a little bit and refocus back towards the GSPs and how you engage with the SGMA process. So maybe Trevor, you can dive in. What about low priority basins? Are there deadlines, or is there any funding planned for assisting low priority basins at SGMA?
Yeah, so there's kind of two questions there. One in terms of deadlines. Really the timelines provided in SGMA are because of the state board's authority to potentially intervene. And of course, those timelines really refer to GSAs preparing GSPs in high and medium priority basins. So there are no timelines associated with low or very low priority basins if they were choosing to develop a GSP. In terms of funding, that is, and I believe the question may be referring to grant funding, specifically state grant funding. When we receive authorization to develop a solicitation for funding for grant opportunities, it's really done in a public process. We often have scoping meetings, and then we have draft solicitation public comments. And so I'm assuming this commenter may be interested in the future providing comments to the grant program in terms of consideration that funding go to low priority basins, perhaps in some way. To date, just to be clear, the grant program has been focused on making sure that the funding is focused on the areas that absolutely need to comply with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Again, those being the medium or high priorities. So that has been the focus of the funding to date.
Great. Why don't we talk about some of the deadlines, specifically those for critically overdrafted basins. I know there's some concern over a very tight timeline to submit a GSP. Are there any additional requirements? There's some questions about the workshops that were attended earlier. There's some clarify maybe that aspect.
Yeah, so I see here in the question there may be some need to make some differentiation between adopting a GSP and actually submitting it to the department. So the deadlines that we've referenced, January 31st, 2020 for critically overdrafted basins, and 2022, January 31st, 2022 for all other high and medium priority basins. That's really the deadline to submit an adopted plan to the department. That's really gone through the water code requirements in SGMA in 10,728.4, as well as the requirements in the GSP regulations. When a plan is, though, adopted by a GSA, there is a process in that water code section in terms of receiving public comments. And so this question may be related to ensuring that the GSA schedules enough time to go through that public comment process and consider those public comments. But it also should be noted that when adopting a plan, the GSA can implement that plan immediately. They need not wait for our review in terms of a determination of whether that plan we feel meets the requirements of the GSP regulations. In other words, we actually have up to 2 years to review GSPs that are submitted to us. And so we're assuming that local agencies will be implementing their plans as soon as they're adopted. well in advance of us giving a determination of whether that plan's adequate or not.
Great. I think that clarifies things a little bit. I've had a handful of questions regarding basin prioritization and specifically the reprioritization following basin boundary modifications in 2016. Maybe you can just give us an overview and a status update there.
Yeah, so we are definitely working through that process. As the commenter notes here, the requirements for us to reevaluate, look at basin prioritization is not only because of basin boundary modifications that occurred in 2016, but also an obligation that we look at an additional component of criteria 8, which is to look at adverse impacts to local habitat and local stream flow. In addition, we're looking at making sure we're using up-to-date and the most recent data and available information in this analysis. So this is an ongoing process. I know publicly we've mentioned in the past that we thought we'd get to these results before this date. We're still working through this and hope to have some news in the near future. It should be noted, though, if we come out with those draft prioritization results, they'll be just that, draft results, and we'll really be interested in making sure that we're using the best available data and information in making those determinations before they're finalized.
Great, thanks. So why don't we dive into this one? This is a more specific question about when we're preparing our study on the basin outline in terms of defining where how deep the freshwater resource may go. Wouldn't it help to map the depth of groundwater basin, where they can be found? Is that something that we're doing, or is that something that GSA should do? How should that question be approached? What's the depth of the basin? Where's the freshwater resource lie, and how do you account for that appropriately in the planning process?
Yeah, and so that is a requirement that the GSAs have to define in their GSP. So that's in the hydrogeologic conceptual model of the GSP. As far as information that could potentially be helpful to identify the base of fresh water, there are some deep monitoring wells that have water quality. On the SGMA data viewer, you can search by depth. So if you search wells, you could see some of these wells are, you can search by the depth of them. Some of them go down to 3,000 feet. So you'll be able to see which ones are deep from our data viewer. But as it relates to the oil and gas information, there is a wealth of information on the Department of Conservation's Oil and Gas and Geothermal Research, or DWR website. So if you Google that, you should be able to get to another interactive map that they have that shows all of the oil and gas wells and well logs, and there's geophysical logs associated with them that could provide a lot of relevant information to answer that question. All right.
Great. We're getting near the end. Why don't we look at this? Maybe some funding questions. Is there funding for future grants for monitoring infrastructure?
So maybe I'll handle this from the grant funding side. There is Prop 68. We cannot advocate for a proposition. I'll just put that out there. But were that to pass, there's potentially funding for SGMA-related implementation for local agencies. So it's always possible that were that to pass, that type of monitoring infrastructure component possibly could be an eligible project. I'm not sure if, Stephen, you want to add anything about technical support services.
Yeah, I'll just touch on that briefly. So in the near term, we do have some dedicated funding to be installing monitoring wells. As I mentioned initially, our focus is in the critically overdrafted basins, but then we could be reaching out to the other high and medium top priority basins as well. And that is for the purpose of installing, dedicated groundwater monitoring wells.
Okay, well, thank you very much for those responses. We've worked through the questions that we have time for. Some of you may not have had a response. We have triaged those, and we'll coordinate a response with you directly where we can. Stephanie, I think we're about up against time here.
Yeah,
or Stephen.
So I'll pass it on to Stephen to provide closing remarks.
All right, thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Tim. So as a reminder, just like to go back to the slides here. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted along with the slides that you saw today on our DWR events webpage at the link below. And so with that, I'd like to thank all of you for attending this webinar, and a special thanks to the DWR team here in the room in Sacramento, the regional offices, the state board, and our consulting team for supporting the events leading up to this meeting and these meetings, as well as developing the tools and services that we've talked about today. So special thanks to that group. And also, if you haven't already, I would recommend reaching out to your local points of contacts, regional coordinators, or us here in Sacramento. You can get more information on these topics, and we look forward to working with all of you as we move through SGMA implementation. Thank you, everyone, and have a good weekend.